Our brain is a machine, is a tool, is a wonderful part of us, wonderful part of nature at the same time, that it's working through mapping. In neurological science, in cognitive science, they call this the neurological maps, the modeling, the function of brain that it has to model, it has to map to create a structure. And also sometimes I say we are bees making, like the bees making honey every day, non-stop. We humans make meaning every day, non-stop, every moment.
Welcome to Purposeful Empathy, a show that is dedicated to amplifying the voices of people from across the globe who understand the world needs more empathy and are doing something about it. This season includes 25 incredible episodes devoted to the inner development goals. Based on the science of personal transformation, the IDG framework represents 23 skills needed for today's world. And of course, empathy is one of them. You won't want to miss a single episode, so hit the subscribe button now. Thanks for watching and enjoy the show. Welcome to a new episode of Purposeful Empathy. This season is devoted to the Inner Development Goals framework, and I am joined by Dr. Elif Kuş Saillard, who is a sociologist and methodologist. In other words, a scientist of understanding. With more than 2 decades of experience in qualitative methodologies and computer-aided qualitative data analysis, she founded the NAM Qualitative Research Center in Istanbul in 2013, training many social scientists and social science researchers around the world. Elif has developed the meaningful experience model to help organizations and individuals cultivate meaningful experiences. Her pioneering program, Understanding Leadership, unlocks the superpower of understanding, promotes consensus, and overcomes polarization. She calls it, I love it, the superpower of understanding, and I call it the superpower of empathy. So we're simpatico. Through her work, she aims to contribute to a sustainable future by helping people enhance their capacity and capability for understanding in service to a more connected and harmonious world. I absolutely love that. Welcome to the show, Elif.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
We were just
thank you for such a great introduction.
Oh, well, you are an extraordinary person to interview about sense making. I thought I would begin the interview actually by reminding or maybe introducing the IDGs to some listeners and viewers. So the Inner Development Goals, I'd recommend that you check out their website. This will be in the show notes. Are a collection of 23 skills, leadership skills, to be developed in order to create the change internally that we want to see in the world. And they're divided in 5 categories. The first one is being, so it's a relationship to self. And the second one is thinking, which is all about the cognitive skills. And in that category, there are things like critical thinking, complexity awareness, perspective skills, long-term orientation and visioning, and something called sense making. And when I read the definition, which I'm going to do out loud, I thought, oh, when I came across your bio and the work that you do, I said, oh my God, here's an expert in sense making. I obviously have to interview her. So I'm really grateful for your time. And I just discovered 10 minutes ago that for me, it's 3:40 in the afternoon. For Elif, it's 10:30 at night. And I said, oh, I'm keeping you up so late. And she says, no, it's summertime. So I said, oh, great, Turkish cultural dimension coming into that too. I love it. Or she was just gracious, maybe a mix of both. So sense making, according to the IDG framework, is skills in seeing patterns and structuring the unknown and being able to consciously create stories. So I wonder, do you want to respond to that as a frame before we get into more questions about you?
Yeah, I am grateful that this framework is there, because thanks to IDG framework, now it's really helping to communicate better what it means, all these skills, and sense making is there. So I like it. It makes, through this, I am able to map also and to show the map what it means, sense making, and why it is there and why it is not there, you know. In fact, it is under the dimension of being, and the definition is nice, sure. In some ways, it's very good that it is located under being, and where we also see the skill presencing is also under the being. So for me, our existence, the starting, the center, the focus is in fact the presencing. So in presencing, if we deep dive into what is it, it's our connectedness. And somehow we humans, we are disconnected. It's happening for many reasons, which I can tell. There is this brain, very advanced, developed brain, which is functioning very well and helping as like a perfect servant, but it's can also be a source of disconnection, which we call our mind, you know. And there also there are other layers for this disconnection, but there presencing and sense making are very, very, very connected. And we humans, we are biological, sociological, psychological, all of them together intertwined. And machines, I call like that, but maybe not a good way to say. Sometimes I say machines producing meaning all the time, and which in fact sense making is we can also think it's meaning making. And also sometimes I say we are bees making, like the bees making honey every day, non-stop. We humans make meaning every day, non-stop, every moment. So that's, in fact, sense making is that process. But it's okay, I won't go so deep, but what I can say is that if we think mostly, because it's all, there also mentioned the story making side, the relation with story. So mostly, if we go deeper, we can say that it's also connected with the feeling, the interconnectedness, but it's very difficult to go deeper there. So when we talk about sense making, we mostly talk about meaning making, and that's how our brain works. Our brain is a machine, is a tool, is a wonderful part of us, wonderful part of nature at the same time, that it's working through mapping. So this mapping that we need, it's our existential process, that our physical part of our physical body at the same time. It's not only, you know, the division mind or body. You know, it's not anymore. Now science arrived at a point that we have this wonderful concept, embodied mind. So we are embodied minds, meaning that the whole body is involved in sense making. And so it's, you see, I talk a lot in this, you know, because I'm sorry if I'm not clear, you can stop me and just ask question. Don't hesitate. All what I'm trying to say that our brains and our very existence in this world, in this physical world, it's part of that. We all the time create meaning. In fact, in neurological science, in cognitive science, they call this the neurological maps, the modeling function of brain, that it has to model, it has to map, to create a structure. And the social layer, I am a sociologist, and then if we focus on sense making, it's for us meaning making, and it is in the context, social context. So in fact, social layer is always intertwined with physical layer. In fact, it's that separation is, you know, it's only for that we have to focus the division of the sciences also based on that. But in fact, in reality, they are intertwined. So sociologically, that is for us meaning creation. And there it comes to make sure that our existence is for life, of course, in life, is continuing as organizing itself for life, to live. That's why we are here.
I have 100 follow-up questions based on just you responding to the definition produced by the IDGs. And I know we have a set of questions that we want to actually get through in an organized way, but what comes up for me, and maybe you can share a response to whatever's alive for you that you think you might be able to add some value to. One idea is that I know that there's a resurgence right now around psychedelics, psychedelic research. And part of the reason why it's so important in research centers right now that are working with people, mostly in a therapeutic context, right, to help people who have depression or addictions or PTSD, is that there's the neuroscience of how our brain works, and our brains respond to things almost on autopilot because we are used to having certain thoughts based on our lived experiences. And so the neural connections in our brains are quite defined for us, but they also know that there's neuroplasticity, that we can change those networks and the patterns. And part of what sort of psilocybin, for example, does is that it actually breaks certain pathways to create new ones. So that was one question. I wasn't planning to come out of the gates and ask you about that, but I see your face lit up about it. Do you believe that there's value in how we make sense of the world and our own experiences, that possibly psychedelics might be useful in other contexts to break racism or to think, I don't know, more holistically? I just wonder if you could respond to the psychedelic aspect of sense making.
I can understand it from my perspective, because as a sociologist who studied sense making for years in different contexts, and sense making is if it is meaning making, it's always contextual. And what is context? It is the social context, yes, but not only. It's the space-time, where, when. So all this together, I always really, even though sense making is in fact unique, every individual has, like our, you know, fingerprint, it's something unique, but also culturally different, even though it's like that. But there is something that I can say that the common is that the meanings that is created by humans in whatever the culture, it doesn't matter. They easily forget that it is them who created it. It is to serve their existence, to create for individual and for social life, to make it able to share a similar, you know, common understanding. That's called meaning field. We can call like a whole meaning field, but we forget it, and we take it in many different social problems. Based on my research that I witnessed, behind the scene, if it is this, that we fix the meaning, we fix it like, this is the perfect meaning, I frame it, and even we are competing with each other to offer the best frame, and then we want it that it will work all the time for in all the contexts for everybody. Even in the same context, it's impossible that it will stay the same with time. It will change. Everything is changing. So this is the illusion that we have. So this with this, what can happen, that these psychedelics can a little bit, probably this is what I read and what I heard when I was listening to scientists, that their role, that they show the fluidity, the unknown, the unstructured part of the reality that we are in.
Which opens up to new possibilities, right? So I didn't even know you were going to go back to psychedelics for a second. I was going to respond to the fact that what comes up for me when I listen to you speak is that if we are all sense-making, meaning-making creatures, and we have our individual capacity for meaning-making, we have our cultural dimension to meaning-making, but and those might be different, right? Our individual experiences and making sense of things and our cultural ways of seeing things are different. What we have in common is this capacity to make sense of the world, and that what was alive for me as I was listening to you is that some people get ahead of the narrative and are able to put their sense making on display, saying this is what's happening, and that becomes the narrative that we adopt, and that becomes the narrative that we buy into, for good, for better or for worse, right? So we can see politicians using experiences and making sense of it for us. We can see artists doing the same, which might, typically be more subversive. So you see authoritarians that are using narratives that are very useful for people to make sense of the world. So it's interesting because I think what you're saying is the thing that we all have in common is that the way we see the world and the way we've made sense of the world can be disrupted. That there is the capacity to disrupt that way of sensing the world, making sense of the world, by having new narratives and new possibilities show up. Is that right?
Perfect. You're amazing. Perfect.
Okay. Amazing. All right. Okay, so Elif, there are big questions I want to ask you about, but I want to do a little brief visit on who you are and what brought you to study this. So could you tell us a little bit about yourself and sort of some of the work that you've done to bring you to be an expert on sense making?
Sure, thank you for asking this. I'm a sociologist, and my expertise is in we have 4 sub fields in sociology, 4 main. And one is called general sociology and methodology. So I am that's my field of expertise. So at the same time, I became methodologist, I can say, but especially qualitative methodologies, my expertise. So when we talk about this broad umbrella qualitative methodologies, in fact, it is always the focus of the methodology in itself is the act of understanding. So when it comes to the scientific knowledge production process, behind we have methodologies and methods and tools, they come together. And in the social sciences, there was a division and a little bit polarized, but now it's changing. So the mainstream was the quantitative statistics, the whole so-called, not so-called, but the whole known until now, the mainstream science. But there were always a group of scientists who insisted that another alternative methodology is possible, which can use the act of understanding which can focus the whole process and methods on understanding, because the modern science, including natural science, they distance themselves from understanding. Because it was for an understandable reason, I say, because in that time they didn't have enough. Because when you use understanding, when you want to understand something, you touch subjectivity. And in that time, science was not allowed to have any subjectivity. Today, everything is different. Now we are in a different modern physics, quantum physics, everything is understood. Everything is subjective. And so today is everything different. In that time, it was like that. So I am coming from the not mainstream, we can say, a group of sociologists created this, and the Chicago School and the interactionist perspective. So this was my whole theoretical frame, but at the same time, empirically, I was involved thanks to the method, to being a methodologist. At the same time, I was studying methodological problems in itself. My hypothesis was which interview technique, which interview method is better to understand and to create knowledge, scientific knowledge, blah, blah. So my connection with the empirical world, that means that, what it means. For example, I was involved in research to understand HIV positive vulnerability, people living with HIV, or whatever, or in another context, 11 years employee experience, listening employees and understanding them. Because and especially understanding, when it comes to understanding, everybody feels and accepts that surveys, they are not enough. Any measurements available, not enough. So we need something else to understand, but also we need a scientific report. So that's how, in different contexts and in the organizational world also. So 11 years of listening employees and making data analysis. And what is very interesting here, that which makes a little bit special, that my profile is a little bit special, because I'm not only expert in qualitative methodologies, which many different ways of designing methods to understand, to create social research for understanding. But at the same time, it's because mainly they focus on the data generation process. But at the same time, I am expert in how to make systematic scientific analysis of this data. So it means that for example, our talking now, this interview is recorded. Then it will become a text. So that text can be analyzed both statistically, but also semantically. Different meaning layers can be discerned. So I'm in all my career, I am very much involved in this process of analysis also. And what I call that, it's not only that you generate data to really listen, to empathetically, the whole research, and then to understand. But it's also in the analysis process to be able to continue listening, because that data you generated for a wonderful reason. But if you fail as a scientist during the analysis process, which is happening because it's not easy also, it's very rich data. The technology is helping a lot. So long story. Yeah.
So, okay, let me just catch this last little bit and see whether or not I'm right about this. So when you're saying, because I love this idea, that the data, complex data, can be analyzed quantitatively, and you could be listening through a qualitative research methodology like interviews, and you'll be picking up on things that are not necessarily stated out loud, but implicit in all sorts of other modalities, whether it's a sigh, whether it's looking away, whether it's like something you feel emotively or energetically in the room. But then you're saying like you can, so we're doing an interview online and then it could be transcribed. You could read the transcription, but the transcription itself might also reveal another layer of information. So for example, okay, so this is where my brain went. I was like, okay, so if we're talking about massive storms, okay, or some kind of environmental disruption, whether it's hurricanes or tsunamis or whatever, you could do interviews with people who survived it. And you could talk about what actually happened, and then you would get data about how they perceived the experience. But you could read that data, and so tell me if I'm overreaching or if I'm really actually getting what you're talking about. You could read the data about how much pain a community would be in, describing an experience, like a natural disaster, that would not necessarily be coded in specific words, but that you could sense that.
Yes.
Is that what you're talking about? Like that, for example.
Perfect. Yes, exactly. It is like that, and it has a specific term in the methodology, and it's called the whole big approach is called grounded theory. So means that from the ground, from the data, from the people's their own experience, in a very broad sense, like their own sensing, sense making, that as much as you deep dive, as much as, you know, there are different levels also in that process. And let's say by only making them talk. So let's say by only listening, that's also if they are talkative, if they say many things, for example, you have enormous rich data. So that's something. And if you also, if you are in the field, if you have observation, that's another layer also. But then instead of imposing the concepts as a scientist, imposing because maybe you have some hypothesis, you have some, you know, then the whole theoretical fields, and if you are directly
projecting
it, in fact, it's called like it's a human, you know, it's like that. That's why science is methodology. That's why the whole methodological processes are defined very well to go through this, to help us and to as much as avoid this. So this specific approach is that, yes, make it grounded, meaning that not from your mind, but from the ground, from their experience. And there also comes the stories, in fact. When you listen people, there is the relation with the sense making and the stories. That's very interesting. Whatever the experience you want to, you know, make research, and you want to see the, you know, lived experiences of people to understand. So that's always there comes the stories. And that's very interesting. People really, whatever we experience, it's a package with the story. It's packaged. So it's coming that it's not only that specific experience, it's not only that moment, but their whole personal story, their whole collective story, conscious, unconscious, you know, all they come together, and when they talk about the experience, they are also coming, but people are not aware of this. This, after when we start analyzing, then we can see this is the conscious, this is the unconscious collective memory, this is this, this is, it's, it requires, but also at the same time, there, before going to the high abstract concepts, you are still really continuing. There are different steps. It's called grounded open coding process. So what I call, you continue listening during the data analysis also, instead of quickly imposing the result. It's that's also.
You make me think of people who have studied anthropology. They get PhDs in anthropology, and then they end up working in design thinking, where they do interviews with users of products or services, and really are there listening without preconceived ideas, trying to sort of filter away their own implicit biases about people's experiences. I think that's so interesting. And I guess my question now is, if sense making is a skill that we can develop, how do we go about developing that skill?
That's a perfect question. In my view, we are already overskilled as humans. We are overskilled. What is needed is it's so autopilot. So what is needed is that to gain a little bit reflection on sense making, in fact. Because really we are overskilled. Every human is so much muscle in sense making, I promise. Even there are brain studies which are very funny, I find. The neurological, there are some experiments that checking the left brain and right brain, and they say left brain is the part we use for language and story making. And they ask some simple questions to people. They based on just they ask some very simple tests, physical tests, and then just after that, few minutes after, they ask the experience, for example, many different stories, the same experience, only few minutes, something very simple, but they came up with many different stories. So they say the left brain is involved. So, but I'm trying to say we are perfect for that. But the thing is that what is needed to improve, why it is a skill there is in fact to make aware of that you have this skill, you are using like an autopilot, but you can learn the process of it, and you can master it a little bit, like you can use it with a bit more consciously. That's maybe my.
Okay, so then the follow-up question is, if we are on autopilot making sense of things, and the invitation that you're putting forward is to reflect on how autopilot we are and give more space for just growing the aperture to sense make a little bit wider, before going, before coming to a final conclusion about how you've made sense of something. How do you think doing that would improve relationships, and also improve organizations?
Thank you. Before that, I remembered one thing. It's related also. There is one thing that we can improve impact, which I have to say. In fact, we are embodied mind. So sense making, normally the whole body is involved. But somehow we are disconnected, especially in the modern world, and then we use only the mental skills for sense making. And the somatic part, the body part is very important. So if we want to really, as you said, to change it and make it in a way that is more connecting, creating more connections. So the first is that starts from me, like inner work, that I am more connected with my own body, and then I can try to really try to see how my body is involved in my sense making. So there I can also connect with the right brain, and like Daniel Siegel's message, he's calling it's not only right and left and many, part, that integration, the integration. So meaning that, because it's I don't need to explain, not need to, but it's there is it's not only the brain, but when we talk brain, it's also the whole body. They are all very connected. So all the senses, my feet, my hands, my skin. So unfortunately, we are very, very disconnected with this in the modern times.
Including our microbiome, as I understand, right? That our microbiome is talking to our brains and sensing things, right? That's also part of it, right?
Yes. Yes, and that's why, in fact, I arrived at a point. I'm writing a book since 5 years now, and it was like on understanding. So understanding. So I was really very curious to go beyond sociology and the social aspect of sense making, but also because with the neuroscience and activism, embodied mind, and all this. So the more and more and more, and as you said, it's microbiome, everything. So the whole physical complex world is involved, and it's an web of interaction, in fact. But until now, we are the mental part, and the story making from that mental part was very visible and dominant, because it's more manipulative, also easily you can manipulate. That's why politics use narratives and stories a lot. Maybe that's why. But if you go deep with today's science, so anyway, but I came to a point that in science, I think our unit of analysis needs to be moment, like in that moment, what happened is a combination of the whole complex. It's the social context, but also the physical context, but biological, chemical. It's enormous. The complexity is enormous. Yeah, I can imagine a future. Maybe not directly. My daughter is 12 years old. Maybe not directly, even maybe for her, but maybe for her children, hopefully. That's finally, I'm optimistic. I really find this many miseries. It was a very misery thing, that how we make sense. And until now, humans invested everything that we call culture, the whole meaning sphere, in fact. And it was only based on this, mostly, dominantly, because it was misery. They didn't know. We didn't know. So it was only based on the stories, the very limited part of it. And I say now, we transferred it to ChatGPT, the generative AI technology, that to create the stories, to create the whole information that use it, and just, so we even created wonderful machines to serve to this. So finally, today, we can understand better that words are very important. The talk, conversation is very important. Story is very important, but they are not the dominant. They are not the source of. They cannot be the source of sense making all the time dominantly. Then there becomes the conflict arises, and because everybody tries to impose their own frame.
What I think I heard you say about the dawn of AI and quantum computing is that we can now generate factual information based on AI combing what's out there in the world of human knowledge, and it can write a first draft of something. And then we can actually ask AI to say, sense into this with this as a prompt, for example, like, write the thing as if you were a 14-year-old teenager, or write, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what the prompts would be, but I'm sensing that you're saying that AI has the capacity to go deeper on answers based on the prompts that we give it, that we would, as thinkers, we would only stay at the surface level. We wouldn't have those nuanced depths of perception. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
That's true. That's one side, one good thing. The other good thing is that we are so obsessed in creating narratives, discourse, and stories, and we are almost competing to create new words all the time. And we have too many words now. Even Daniel Siegel, he's calling to simplify, and he says we need to go from noun state to verb state, so in a dynamic mode. So we have too many words also. So okay, we created this word machine. We will let it doing the job. And for the coming generations, I am saying this, that they will finally will feel free from that mental load, very heavy task. So they will be more connected with the complexity that is involved in reality, in their, first of all, which is in their body already, all senses.
I get it. So you're saying we're offloading the easy work of thinking for us to be busy sense making with our full capacity and complexity, including our biology.
Full embodied sense making.
Wow. Okay. Yes, that's interesting. And do you believe that if we do get embodied in our sense making, we will make better decisions to improve humanity's well-being?
Exactly. Because then it will be sense making even beyond stories that can unite us, but that can also be source of conflict. So beyond stories means the whole body. The whole body means that acceptance of complexity. It's putting human in a humble position. So in that humble position, this empathy.
Yeah, I was intuiting that. Yes.
That it's an empathetic state, in fact.
Yes, because we're feeling what
feeling level. Exactly. In fact, our own understanding and sense making was built upon these words and stories. As Antonio Damasio is really is a great scientist, and he has written many books, and he has a huge accepted, appreciated scientific research and theory. And he says that the feeling level is the you know, the discourse that we are shifting now. Before, when it's when it comes to the nature, the whole narrative was different. Today, even now the king of England, he at that time he was Prince Charles, King Charles. He wrote a book called Harmony, I think in 2015 or 17. So now we are shifting to another narrative on nature. So nature is now seen as a harmonious unit, or, you know. So he wrote even a book, and there even he is apologizing. He says, we didn't know this. We were unable to see the harmony. So that's why we were distracted as humans. And today, so if life is harmony, if nature is harmony, then there is a connection there. There is a web of connection which is serving to this harmony then. This is my theory now, my hypothesis, and it is in fact partly proven by Antonio Damasio, that he claims that there is a deep connectedness level serving to harmony, homeostasis, and there is the level of feeling, and the level of feeling even before sense making. So and the term emotion and feeling, they are different. They are not the same. So emotion is coming from the meaning field, in fact. But feeling is a kind of, you know, the connectedness serving to this homeostasis or harmony, what we call. So,
well,
a little bit anyway, yeah.
I mean, I love this so much because I just finished doing interviews with two individuals that are working on a project together called Radical Empathy around ending war in 2 generations. So she's an Arab Muslim and he is a Jewish American. And the two of them in public as not performative art, but performance art. So they're not really performing. They are just being together, and they're sharing the feelings that they have about what's going on in Gaza. But the goal isn't to convince anybody in the crowd to see things from their perspective or change their narratives or their stories. The goal is to surface the feelings each of them has and hold space for each other to share, to feel the unity of pain that is present. And I've watched the 10-minute, goes on for an hour, but they did a little 10-minute video of it. I came in slightly suspicious about, I don't know, suspicious, maybe that's not the right word, but, with my little, I wonder what's going to happen. And then I sat with it and it unfolded, and there's no way, anyways, maybe some people would look at it and still be busy with their stories, but I felt.
So it was successful.
I felt healing. I felt healing present. And so I think that's what you're describing. So it's interesting because as somebody who's trying to understand human sense making and understanding how do we understand, you're saying all the good cognitive work that our brains are capable of are actually going to be handled by machines that can do it better and faster. And we, as part of the natural system, capable of feeling and sense making with 360 intuition, but all our maybe intergenerational, who knows, we are going to be more sophisticated thinkers and sense makers as a result. And because of that, society will ascend to something where we are more compassionate, more collaborative, more peaceful. That's what I'm hearing you say.
perfect. That's why I'm optimist. I'm seeing, what I see is that the coming future, after, of course, there will be a tough period, but okay. But if you look at the positive side, thanks to this technology and the science now with the new paradigm and everything, the mystery is there is, it's not a mystery. It's not something unknown anymore, that process. So finally humans will create harmonious societies, harmonious social forms, and maybe name won't be society anymore. Maybe they will call another, because even the word society is from 18th century, something very,
So what do you suppose, as a penultimate question, and I know I'm keeping you up very, very late, but this has been a fascinating conversation. What are the practices that we should work on in order to be more embodied sense makers? So does that meditation, reflection, all of that good stuff?
they are all helping a lot. But I like, it's always, for example, let's say for personal, in our private personal lives, most of us can experience or already experienced based on the age, but now for the global, it's a kind of general problem also, that, meaning crisis. So let's go from there. So whenever you feel it's there, that you are more and more losing the finding meaning, or the, meaning has also that, in that crisis. So what is advice? The work, if you want to change, it starts from you. You have to do inner work, okay, then what you need to do, where I start. Of course, the presencing in the, you breathing, grounding, meditations, the somatic, many different embodiment exercises, or somatic, all these, of course. But at the same time, they say, the imagination, and, to open, because the meaning crisis is very much related with how fixed you were. You fixed yourself. You stuck in one meaning frame. So you need to, crack out of it. So you need to go back to your imagination and your dreaming. And how you can do this, that you need to, they advise that journaling also. So, and for me, like journaling is for me that it's cleaning the meaning field that you never did, it's a real cleaning, that your own, and then your memory, your collective. It's always collective anyway, it's always social. So then you, in fact, empty and clean by journaling that meaning sphere. That's, in fact, called subconscious for me, is the messy meaning field. And the conscious is not the one that you cleaned and like you organize and you take control, you take care of it. This is my way of expression from my own personal work also, that I felt that this must be for this, if I want to change, if I want to really have better relations, then my relation with myself, and there the big work is that meaning work, but at the same time, many simultaneously, the body work, whatever. There are now, in today's world, we have many options. Each time I discover something new, just this morning I was in an embodiment group, so
Well, that's fascinating. And it makes me think of Dr. Eunice, who says science fiction has been with us for a long, long time. And if you look back to books of science fiction, they've predicted what has actually come to light. I mean, we're on a Zoom call where we can see each other and look at, we're on opposite ends of the world, 9 hours apart. And, here we are together. That was dreamed about in science fiction not too long ago. He believes that we need social fiction too. And so the next step for me, where I go when you're talking about journaling and sort of cleaning up the messiness, is that opens up the space for what could be. And, that could be very helpful in creating a self-fulfillment prophecy around, what we want to bring into the world. As Charles Eisenstein, the beautiful world that our heart knows is possible. Yeah. So I don't want to end this conversation, but you got to go to sleep. And thank you for all of the passion you've brought to this conversation. I always end on the same question, and that is, if you can think, this is a podcast after all, devoted to empathy. If you can think of a time when you were on the receiving end of empathy, and what that meant for you.
Yeah. In fact, I am a bit lucky, probably. I have several. I received great empathy, but maybe mostly from my mother, maybe. So it's like as the way, should I say go very specific, or should I say how I
A specific anecdote would be very helpful.
Okay, then it's like this. I am 49 years old almost, and still it's a kind of luxury, or a kind of richness that we all need good relations. So to have good relation with your mother is also, we started with your mother's story. So I am like this. I can behave like a child, even now in my this age, and I can say I made this mistake, and I can truly say, really honestly, which is not fitting her values, which is not fitting her fears. I am raised, she's from Central Anatolia. She has some cultural values very specific to that region, and she's very devoted to that cultural values, for example. But I have my own story, even though I am very attached to her. So, and I'm married with a Frenchman. I started living in France and all this. And still today, I can share with her that, I made this wrong. When I say this, it is wrong for her, for example, I know, for the value. But she is like listening, then she's not even, she's able to have to access that feeling, connection. So she's surprising me, each time I know this time she can blame me, or this time, yes, I am wrong, for example. But she is somehow, in a magical way, just listening, but silence in a good way. And at the end, yeah, I know this can happen. Yeah, it can happen to everybody, then she's so she's a person surprising me. I'm lucky. So for me, this surprised that, because I share something with I have this, difficulty that I am judging myself, and and then she's the judge for me, that if I dare to share with her that's the judge, you know. But then she's surprising with me that you know, just listening and just showing the care. That's it, you know. No need to extra comment, no need to this and that. Yeah, it's like that, you know. I don't know. For me, maybe I was not able to be very specific, but the relation between a daughter and a daughter married with another nationality, Central Anatolian mother, you know, people can imagine many things.
I have heard a lot of stories, and what I'm taking away from your story is actually a really interesting thing that I'm going to reflect on. I mean that sincerely. I'm going to reflect on that. Your story is about non-judgment, and I wonder if non-judgment is a form of empathy, because that's what the question was, how has somebody extended empathy to you? And you've shared a story of your mom who has sat with you listening with completely different cultural norms in her mind based on history and place. And yet she has just listened and shown up with non-judgment. And you have felt her empathy through that. So that's interesting.
That's very interesting. And I'm saying, wow, will I be like her? I hope.
You have a 12-year-old daughter, right? So she'll let me know in a few years. Elif, thank you so much for a wonderful conversation. It was so perfect. You've used the word perfect several times on this call to talk to you about sense making as part of the IDG framework. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. I'm honored. I feel so happy, and I really feel so happy to get to know you, to meet you, and the whole empathy world that you created. It's very, very, very important, very helpful. Thank you.
I appreciate you saying that. Thank you so much. And I want to thank all the listeners and the viewers, and we'll see you next week at Purposeful Empathy.
If you know someone who'd benefit from this episode, please share it with them. Post the link on your socials and hit the subscribe button now. The world needs more empathy, and you have an important role to play.